So much for staying with us. Now, Africans living in the diaspora have asked their governments to include them in the development agenda in the continent. This was discussed at a meeting that took place in Nairobi, attended by 150 Africans drawn from different countries in the continent and outside the continent. Now, with hundreds more following the proceedings, virtually Africans living in the diaspora met in Nairobi with hundreds following virtually to discuss the agenda on diaspora. Let's take a look.
The Kenya Film Classification Board is honored to participate in the inaugural African Diaspora Symposium under the aegis of the 7th Diaspora Homecoming Convention, themed leveraging diaspora resources for Africa's economic recovery post-COVID-19. This symposium has come at an appropriate time when the world is battling the novel COVID-19 pandemic that has shattered economies and led to the loss of livelihoods across the globe. Indeed, the conversations that will result from this symposium will aid in charting the way forward. Leveraging the diaspora resources for African economic recovery post-COVID-19. This symposium has come at an appropriate time when the world is battling the coronavirus. And like Shema said, our participation as a board, as a Kenya Film Classification Board and agents in the government, is to say that we must have hope. The resilience of Africans is known. And as human beings, every time the world has been faced with a challenge, we have been able to find a way of, like the phoenix, coming back and finding our bearing. And so, as a board that leads or that is in charge of film and broadcast content regulation in the country, where we set the age appropriateness for the viewers of content, we are also involved greatly in redefining the role of film and media in pushing the African development narrative, because the media plays a very critical role. Our chief guest today and the honorable members who are here will attest to it that democratic space that we have today in this country and Africa could not have been possible without a free and independent media.
We are very proud as a continent that is the youngest continent in the world to have such a resilient diaspora, the African diaspora that has invested here. And we are happy to come here to engage with you. But even as we engage, we are looking at a post-COVID-19 period. We are looking at recovery strategies. And just last week, on Friday, we were meeting all the counties, and His Excellency President Uhuru Kenyatta unveiled the county post-COVID recovery strategy and plan. And we're talking over almost 132 billion that our counties are coming together to see how we can mobilize resources and over the next 3 years have a clear plan of recovery.
And that right there forms the basis of our discussion this afternoon, the diaspora agenda. And I'm joined live by Madam Anne Gaither. She's the CEO, founder and CEO, Regal Africa Group. Good afternoon, Madam. Thank you so much for joining us on Bottom Line Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Great. Straight on, let's talk about that meeting. I know we have sort of like given a speculation of what transpired in that meeting, but what was discussed and what are some of the recommendations that came out of the meeting, Madam?
All right. Thank you. So that meeting was a very great meeting. It was a 3-day agenda symposium, really discussing around how do we leverage the diaspora resources, because as we have all known that the diaspora is very important for all of us in Africa, especially us here in Kenya, whereby we get over 300 billion shillings from the diaspora. So how the symposium was actually structured is we had 7 sub-themes that talked about different things about how government has a part to play, what development agencies need to do, also what the private sector needs to do. So I'll just sort of highlight some of the recommendations that came out of this symposium. The first thing, or the sub thing that we really discussed, was about the AFCFTA, diaspora trade and investment. And it was recognized that a lot of the diaspora have a challenge in actually investing back in Africa because of the business environment. So it is very critical for the government to be able to create a good, conducive business environment so that the diaspora can be able to trust that when they invest back home, that everything is going to be okay. And it was actually brought out that, for example, we need to have different governments working together. The US government currently has a program called Prosper Africa, which is really working with the African diaspora to actually get funds and resources so that they can do more trade and investments in Africa. So the question is, what the recommendation is, how can we work together as governments in Africa and other countries to make sure that that happens? It was also recognized that what the main issue about why the diaspora does not invest in Africa is basically lack of information. There is no institutional way in whereby we can actually be able to tell what investors are looking for and what investees are looking for. So there's lack of information. So what came out very clearly during that symposium is that we need to be able to come up with initiative or a project that does exactly that. In fact, one of the action points that was taken out is after the symposium, we're coming up with what we call the ADA, or the Africa Diaspora Alliance, a deal room, which actually works to connect businesses and projects to investors in the diaspora, so that we can mobilize those resources in the diaspora to actually develop our continent. So again, critically, it is known that the diaspora has the resources, be it financially, they have the networks, they have the skills, and they want to participate in national development. But how do they get involved unless the government is on the forefront actually actualizing them? It was actually noted, especially Nigeria and Ghana have done a phenomenal job there. Nigeria had a diaspora bond in 2017, and those funds were used for development. Ghana has actually put it as part of its government agenda to actually have diaspora involved in the national development of its country. So I think these are some of the things that came out quite clearly that we need to be able to ensure that the diaspora is involved to make sure that we're developing our continent. And there are many more things that came out, but those are some of the highlights that we had.
Right, and I like that beat on lack of information and the recommendations on it. But then let's take a look at the theme, which I believe was leveraging diaspora resources for Africa's economic recovery post-COVID. And I'm aware that the Africa diaspora has been seeking a role in the post-COVID-19 recovery efforts. Take us through that.
All right. So yes. So one of the things we noticed is that the diaspora was very resilient, right? So even during COVID, when a lot of them have been affected in the US, in Europe, in Asia, they were still sending money. In fact, more money than they sent before. So post-COVID, what we're trying to say is that we need a structured way for development. We need a structured way of engaging them. One of the things that was actually recognized, because we talked about another sub-thing, which was the AU agenda and diaspora mainstreaming. How do we galvanize the diaspora together? They lack information that I mentioned earlier, but they also lack information infrastructure for us to actually know where is this diaspora money going to. So those are some of the things that were said after COVID. We need to be very structured. We actually need to know where the remittances are going, because some are going for consumption, others are going for development. And if they are going into development, we need to know exactly where they are going to. Also, it was said that post-COVID, right? Because we're getting into the new normal. We need to actually ensure that we're sharing best practices. Like I mentioned earlier, Ghana has been on the forefront, Nigeria has been on the forefront. Okay, what are they doing well so that the rest of the African continent can take those best practices to make sure that the diaspora is also engaged? And communication. There needs to be better communication even after COVID between the Africans on the continent and Africans in the diaspora, because sometimes it feels like we're not speaking the same language, right? Because communication is sort of vague, or, it's not transparent. So if we want them to be very engaged post-COVID, we need to be able to communicate with them better. And it's also very clear that they need to be participation in Africa in regards to global trade. We have Africans around the world, right? And we have this AFCFTA, which is promoting more intra-Africa trade. But what about global trade? Post-COVID, we need to be able to say that African businesses need to be part of the global supply chain, so that it's very clear that they're able to make money and be able to get the resources from Africa, be it the raw materials, be it the human capital that we have in greatness. So all these things post-COVID will be very important. But also top of the agenda post-COVID is mindset shift. We have seen post-COVID that people took up things that people didn't think about, like manufacturing, right? Those are things that we actually looked at and said it was something that would be done out of the country, in China, in Asia. But actually, because of COVID, we have actually seen that Africans on the continent have the ability to grow their industries. And we're seeing the take-up of technology all over the continent. So these are things that we believe are very important post-COVID, and the diaspora can be able to come in with their resources to enable that this happens in regards to development.
All right, and now, even as we wrap up, you're mentioning Ghana and Nigeria, you're saying they're at the forefront. But if we could come back home to Kenya, I'm aware that the country, Kenya, did introduce its first licensed investment fund for citizens living overseas. Could you talk to us about that?
Yes, so Kenya, we have a diaspora policy. There has been talk of diaspora bonds, but it hasn't been implemented. So post-COVID, we need implementation. We need to move from talk to action. In fact, Kenyans have been, I think Kenya is like the third highest in regards to remittances in the diaspora. We get them a lot from North America and Europe. So Kenyans have been able to send money back home, but it's been very informal. We don't even know where the remittances are coming from. In fact, CBK has been trying to look at that data to make sure that it's happening. So what we are hoping that will happen in Kenya is that things will be structured. We'll have the implementation. We'll make sure that we have a diaspora bond happening. And so that is the work that is being done to make sure that that happens, for example, with the Kenya Diaspora Alliance, which is the work that they're doing. And we need more engagement, especially in the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and other ministries in the country, to make sure that diaspora agenda is put on the forefront. It's just not another department, but it's something that is ensured that it's seen as a very important a very important thing to do, because if you know about remittances, it's about 4 to 7% of our GDP. It's very important. And so what we want to see, and this was part of actually the symposium, is that it becomes official. It stops being on paper, it's actually actualized. That is what we're hoping to see in Kenya.
Indeed, and it said we need to move from talk to action. Thank you so much, Madam Anne Wambui-Gaither, the founder and CEO, Regal Africa Group. Thank you so much for making the time for us. Okay, let's move on. Now, as COVID-19 cases spiral in Libya, citizens reveal mixed